This week, John Strand returns to the show, and we get to interview Senior Solutions Architect at ObserveIT, none other than Kevin Donovan. Next up, we are going to interview Senior Research Scientist at Northeastern University's Global Resilience Institute and Source Boston speaker, Rob Naik. In the news, product announcements from Infoblox, InfoSight, ObserveIT, Threat Quotient, Cisco, Tufin, and Symantec could be in some hot water. CA and Palo Alto go on a shopping spree and make some acquisitions. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The teleprompter now has artificial intelligence, Doug, and updates itself. It's awesome. This week, and talk about them as it relates to enterprise security. You're going to do great.
I think that people think that you and I talk like every day at night. You know, It's like, hey, what are you doing? It's kind of a bit of an exhausting week. And I think that we noticed that a little bit in the stories for this week as well.
Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. Stop attackers from domain credential theft and lateral movement with a 99% success rate by using artificial intelligence to control the attacker's perception of the environment. Javelin Networks is the world's first endpoint intrusion containment platform to protect domain networks. Javelin detects targeted attacks and breaches by obfuscating Active Directory, domain controllers, domain identities, domain credentials, and all domain resources. It only takes one compromised machine to jeopardize the entire organization. Don't be a victim. Visit javelin-networks.com and request a demo of AD Protect today. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Welcome to episode 87 of Enterprise Security Weekly for April 11th, 2018. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. On the lines via Skype from South Dakota is none other than John Strand. John, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me back, at least for 1 week. It's good to be here before I take off for Sands, London.
You've had a crazy travel schedule lately, dude.
Yeah, Erica, it's like mud season, and there's no work that can be done outside in the ranch. So she's basically just get out there, teach, and train as much as you can.
Yeah.
Because once summer hits, then I'm home.
Right. Well, that's good. That's good. We look forward to having you around for the summer. A couple of quick announcements. Make sure you visit our on-demand material. That's securityweekly.com/on-demand. If you want to learn about penetration testing, if you want to learn about security training and education, we've got both of those programs up there, as well as several other webcasts that are probably on topics that you would like to learn about. So you can find them all at securityweekly.com/on-demand. Make sure you check it out. And I believe, Kevin, are you long-time listener, first-time caller, Kevin Donovan from ObserveIT? Is that accurate, Kevin?
It is. I actually, long-time listener for sure. Big fan of your guys' work, and I actually have been on before. I did hop on, but I think you were absent that day.
Ah, okay, that could be why I don't remember it. Well, welcome back to the show, Kevin. It's nice to have you. You, of course, the Senior Solutions Architect at ObserveIT. and we're going to talk about basically insider threat stuff, because that's essentially what ObserveIT does today. Is that an accurate statement for our listeners?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, what I want to do is I want to talk about how ObserveIT views insider threats, some quick tips for some of the listeners that don't involve buying technology, stuff that you guys can do today, and of course how ObserveIT helps address the problem.
Yeah, when I think about this in a risk context, I've always put insider threat as a less frequently occurring event than, let's say phishing or malware, a lot of other security events. But when it does happen, it's a lot more damaging than potentially some of those other events. Do you agree with that kind of assessment?
I do. And I think in the malicious terms, right? So a malicious insider, someone actually trying to harm the organization's reputation or brand, or the different motivations that malicious insider threats have. While they are somewhat rare, they can be extremely harmful. But the more common, the ones I see very frequently here at ObserveIT, and certainly can help customers out address some of these challenges, is the accidental insider, right? Someone completely by accident leaking data outside of the organization, putting it in, maybe putting sensitive documents in something like a shadow IT application, in something like Dropbox, maybe copying it over to a USB, printing it off, right?
Or, let's go with the news headlines, Kevin, and be honest, S3 buckets that are insecure, right? I mean, that's been a huge trend lately.
Yeah. So definitely within the insider threat umbrella comes these privileged users, contracts, vendors. And yeah, that's something I was definitely going to mention here is the misconfiguration of an Amazon S3 bucket, not to name any organization's names, but someone completely by accident exposing these repositories and data leaking out from them, right? So how do you put controls, detection, and response capabilities around people making, for the lack of a better term, stupid mistakes?
And that makes it a more frequently occurring event when we include that as kind of the criteria for insider threat.
Correct. Yeah. It's actually funny because this conversation came up at our customer advisory board last week, and when I was first getting immersed in insider threat, I always had this preconceived notion of like Tom Cruise from Mission Impossible, these double agents, right? And it's not that. And if you go looking for them, you're going to have a bad time. So that's not what you're looking for, because those are quite rare. And I was actually watching a webinar for the former CISO of the FBI, and he was saying that if you go looking for them, A, you're not going to find them. Either they're really good at hiding and we're just bad at detecting them, being one. But two, they're extremely rare. So it's important to focus on the more common events and the more common damaging incidents, like the S3 bucket, like you mentioned, that could cause harm to an organization.
Now, Kevin, I think in the past we've looked to DLP or data loss prevention solutions to help us with that insider threat problem. I think John probably has some opinions about that, as well as others in the community, about how effective or ineffective some of the data loss prevention solutions have been. Can you talk about some of the differences between like ObserveIT and some of the struggles we've had with DLP products?
Yes, so certainly. So from what we're finding is that data loss prevention tools are difficult to implement. It's a very time-consuming process. There is a bigger process that goes into it. So the data discovery, the data classification, implementing and maintaining the rules around data loss, then obviously employing the agents that could potentially be heavy and impact user workflow. And certainly those tools are there to help stop data leaks. That's quite literally the name, right? But what we're finding is that clients are spending a ton of time with this and are a bit frustrated with some of the more traditional techniques, and are looking for a new approach to stop data loss, right? And combat insider threat more as a whole. So instead of just looking at what data is doing, looking more at what the person is doing, so they can clearly understand what happened, so they can effectively respond.
So is it more like, dare I say, end user behavior analytics, or is that something different?
So yeah, so end user entity behavioral analytics, like UBA, UEBA, they look at behavior as a whole and try to apply machine learning techniques. What ObserveIT actually looks at is what the person's doing. So instead of looking at what data is doing, instead of looking at the system's doing, what the network's doing, we're looking at the person, their behaviors, and then our threat model is that we tend to mirror Carnegie Mellon University and CERT best practices. And this threat model looks at thousands of incidents dating back to the 1990s, both in the realm of data loss and insider threat. And what they attempted to do is map the technical indicators associated around these incidents. So within our data collection, if we see these types of flags go up, we'll attempt to detect these and then provide a clear visibility trail around them, and then allow you to implement flexible prevention around those types of indicators to prevent users from committing that type of activity.
So what would be some of the indicators that you would actually look at then?
Yeah, so and it's really different than the traditional cybersecurity kill chain, because insiders don't necessarily do things like weaponization or try to establish a C2, like remote access control, right? These users have authorized access and authorized privilege to do their jobs, right? So look at insider threat different, and the FBI has a great one. I always encourage folks look at Carnegie Mellon University and their CERT division. They've put together some really the insider threat kill chain, and what it actually looks for is it looks for the tipping point, recruitment point, someone trying to maybe on the malicious side talk to unauthorized communications or unauthorized communications with outside parties. On the accidental side, maybe they're searching how to bypass endpoint security controls, right? Then you start to see and look for things like the aggregation of data, maybe asking other employees for access, whether it be physical or whether it be access to folders or key projects. And then you inevitably see some people try to take data via unauthorized channels. So then you can look for things like USB insertions, file copies, people plugging in their phone, large emails to their personal email accounts, maybe log in outside of normal business hours. According to our research, the majority of data exfiltration happens after 9 to 5 and on the weekends. So again, you can look for these common things and common indicators to help you start to formulate smoke before the fire and get the warning symbols that's needed to detect insider threats and attempt to prevent data loss as a whole.
And I think that technical component of it is incredibly important because you need to have those technical controls. But one of the things that I'm always concerned about is, and this isn't a technical thing at all, is a lot of the insider threats, there's actual behavioral issues that are made apparent through human resources, whether it's outbursts at work or interpersonal issues or all of a sudden changing in work habits, like all of a sudden they're missing a tremendous amount of work or their work quality goes down dramatically. And when we were working at the Department of Defense, also with the NRO, NSA, FBI type contracts, those were the main indicators that they had that weren't even IT related. So we always had to have this balance between the IT assets of what you could use to identify an insider, and then also the behavioral assets where HR would have to come in. And the hardest part was actually combining the two.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And when I've seen organizations do it right, I always use the term as insider threats a team sport. And the clients that I work with that I've seen do it right, oftentimes will involve HR, senior level management, legal, IT, security. And if for some reason, an insider threat all of a sudden just gets dumped on security, it's like, here you go, security guys, do insider threat things now.
Can you guys throw some tech at this real quick?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, what solutions can be the magic wand to fix this problem? And what are we doing about it, right? And it's like, well, it's a bigger problem than that, and you have to involve multiple organizations and get their buy-in to be involved in these, because I've seen it go wrong if you implement it just by, again, buying the technology and crossing your fingers.
Kevin, one of my goals is running any kind of operations or business process is to, and this is really hard. We suffer from this a lot in security. I want to get things out of email. I want to get things out of spreadsheets. And oh my God, if I took away, Excel, we would be so much more insecure than we are today, right? Because it's a tool that a lot of people rely on. But in the HR context, if they're tracking those HR infractions like John was talking about in some type of system, can that be integrated with ObserveIT so that you can get that information and tie that into the rest of your data?
Yeah, so ObserveIT's one piece of the puzzle, and one of the best practices, again, according to CERT Carnegie Mellon, right, is to build an integrated insider threat technology hub. And what I've seen where that conjoined point typically is it typically resides in SIMs. I've seen it reside in other tools, but having an aggregation point where all this data exists, yeah, is definitely something that organizations should strive to do. And ObserveIT actually will feed into that type of system to augment and support the insider threat efforts from a security operations perspective, as well as insider threats investigations and HR investigations perspective.
Yeah, I look at this as a trend in the industry, in through integrations and then being able to correlate data. I think we're learning about all these different data points we can tie together. So if ObserveIT's telling me, hey, user XYZ, like they plugged in a USB drive and they tried to log into stuff after hours, and oh, by the way, the HR system fed in and they've had 2 complaints or violations in their HR record. And if you take that as a whole and can correlate that, you've got a much better false positive, false negative rate that you can eliminate to come down to the data that's real that will lead you to some kind of insider threat investigation.
I completely agree. And it's all about establishing intent, right? Because to your point earlier, Paul, when you mentioned data loss prevention, if an alert would go off in a system like that and you saw someone trying to copy data to an unauthorized channel, that's all you see is you see these sensitive documents going out. Now, what can you really infer from that? Is that user trying to steal data because they want to go take it and sell it to the nearest competitor? Are they trying to leak it to news or PR outlets? Are they trying to maybe they're just tired and they're trying to go work from home, right? And what the problem is that when you take that sole data centric view, you miss the story and you can't really establish the intent. Again, which is where we're able to come in and help that problem.
And so now the solution from ObserveIT, is that like an appliance, an agent? I know this is a common question I've been asking. I think it was Adrian Santabria that pointed it out to me. It's like, my years doing an analyst role and still to this day doing analyst type stuff. When we hear about solutions, I think the first question with anyone with any kind of technical background or even not, is just understanding like, what is the solution? Is it in the cloud? Is it an agent, a proxy, an appliance? Like what? How is it deployed?
Yeah, great question. What we typically so our standard deployment is an on-prem solution. It is agent based, and I'm probably going to sound like every agent vendor in the world, but it is extremely lightweight. But let me explain. It's running in user mode, so silent installs, no reboot. It's about 15 megabytes in total size. So it is a very effective lightweight agent that we're able to install. And we feel as a company, we have to be at the endpoint because really my thought is that the endpoint is becoming the new perimeter, and especially when it comes to insider threat. And I say that because we have to follow around what the user is doing. And to get that level of visibility, we want to be at the endpoint level.
Oh, John, I think you're on mute.
All right. So I have a question on that. And the reason why I want to bring this question up is because we have a lot of listeners and I have a lot of students that ask me this exact same question. Right now, if you look at the endpoint market space, there are so many vendors entering this endpoint security protection market space. And that some of them are actually having trouble with funding. They're having trouble with actually getting sales and getting into a position where they can actually be viable over the next 5 years. What are you guys doing when you look at this endpoint security market and how it's actually exploding and there's so much investment going into it? And how are you guys going to fundamentally change the way that you approach that endpoint security paradigm to where you are not going to be, we're pretty much doing what every other one of these vendors are doing. How do you actually differentiate in that space?
Yeah. And one of the ways that we predominantly differentiate is that we are running in user mode. So one of our core tenets here is to maintain an extremely lightweight agent, continue to run in user mode, keep the agent as compact and as possible. And we always encourage clients just test it out and take us to the test, right? So it's one of the key pieces is that keeping the lightweight agent, and that's one of our biggest differentiators. So don't impact the end user, don't cause any application crashes. Work and play nicely with other solutions within the security stack. I was working with a client the other day that had, and to your point, John, I saw 9 endpoint security agents. So again, it's like trying to park that 10th car in an already 9-car garage. The way that we're going to have to be able to do that is keep our agent extremely lightweight and not collide with other endpoint agents that are existing already on the systems.
Very cool.
And now, Kevin, and clearly you've been doing a great job of convincing customers of the value of putting an endpoint agent on. Certainly, there's a lot of baggage that comes along with it, but if you want to protect your organization from employees that are not going to be in the office, the only way to do that is with some type of agent. So clearly there's a need, but the value has to be there. And we were just one of our news articles was stating that you have experienced your 5th consecutive record-breaking quarter in terms of revenue. So clearly people are subscribing to your theory, right?
Yeah. And again, it's just like it's one thing to say it. I feel like like I said, every vendor in the world, we have the lightest weight agent ever. But what's attributed to a lot of that success is our ability to stand up the product in an hour and start showing value as soon as these agents are installed. So not only is it lightweight, but as soon as you stand us up, you just immediately start showing value, and we prove it on POCs. So again, we all, in the security market, we all sound very, very alike, but the reason that we've had so much success, in my opinion, and again, being a solutions architect here and helping and being a part of this process, is our ability to actually prove it day of, right? So we come in, we stand it up, and we start showing real world value, and it doesn't morph into this 6-month science project where we're tuning.
Right.
You have several different teams involved. You start seeing real world value quickly, is what I think is attributed to that consecutive growth and success over the past few quarters.
Now, it's interesting as I talk to a lot of vendors. In fact, I just talked to 30 or 40 vendors, right? And many of them, when I ask what their differentiator in the marketplace is, they'll say, well, it's our ease of deployment. And I'm like, whoa, wait. Not everyone can have the easiest deployment in the world. However, like all of those companies I've spoken with, I've even seen recently, a lot of them got acquired. A lot of them had exits, maybe not the best exit for the company. So clearly they had good technology, but to be successful in the marketplace and have a successful exit, whether that's IPO or acquisition, I think one of the things you got to do really well, other than having tech that works, is you got to have tech that's easy to deploy and, like you said, Kevin, show value right away.
Yeah. And that's the key to the success of all this, right? Is that we're trying to make it as turnkey as possible, start showing real world value. That's why we've done the research that we've conducted. We have security researchers in-house that are constantly looking how to show immediate value. Because at the end of the day, yeah, you could be the easiest thing to set up, but if it sits there and no one's logging into the console or no one's actually using the data that's collected, it's just going to waste. And then again, you're just another line item, and you're the guy that's getting ripped out within a year, right? So we don't want to be that. We want to be integrated with existing security operations, and again, continuing to show real world value. And some of the other ways that we do that, and back to John's point, is that it's not only we have the endpoint footprint, but finding ways to integrate us with the broader ecosystem, right, and broader security stacks. And some of our customers were recommending that we plug in and play better with automation and orchestration tools. And we started to build out the first insider threat playbooks with companies like Phantom and Resilient to start build-outs of playbooks that security analysts can follow while using our data, and then even taking some of the more cumbersome steps in an insider threat investigation. So you find yourself spending a lot of times on these investigations, and you start to see a lot of false positives. We think it's very important to integrate with other tools that are alleviate the time-consuming effort to investigate these types of incidents.
Well, and I think it's really important to go back to the beginning of our conversation, where you established that detecting insiders is very different from detecting malicious outsiders, and that process is different. And having a tie to some automation process that can automate that, it's a separate playbook. It's a separate process because the indicators are different. You're looking for different things and maybe taking different actions than you would if you were to discover malware or some other kind of security incident. So having that automation in a playbook is really important.
But I also think, whenever you're talking about setting up an overall security architecture, if an organization cannot detect an insider, then they cannot detect an advanced adversary. And the reason why I say that is when you're looking technically, we're not talking about the behavioral HR things. When you're talking about technically, what an insider does. They access a whole bunch of shares, they try to pull down a bunch of files, they try to access things that they probably shouldn't have permission accessing. That is roughly the same type of activity that an adversary that is an advanced adversary will use to basically take an account that they control like a puppet and make that account do it. So I tell all my students, if you can't detect an insider, then you really don't have a very good security program at that initial detection component.
I completely agree. And the way that we define it too is it's the malicious user, insider that we've been talking about. It's the accidental or negligent insider. But the other piece of this puzzle is the compromised insider. So like to your point, John, having that detection capabilities on outsiders trying to impose themselves as an internal actor is something that you have to be able to differentiate between.
Yeah. Kevin, there was a new version, 7.5. Is that a recent release?
It is, yeah. 7.5 was recently released on April 10th. So we have some exciting new features on that front. We're doubling down on the data exfiltration scenarios that we talked about, and to your point, trying to bolster and in some cases replace traditional DLP solutions.
What are some of the features that people can expect? Of course, there's a paragraph here that your marketing team likely wrote, which does a good job at a very high level, and sometimes with mixed success. But since you're here in the program, give us kind of the rundown.
Yeah, and in my opinion, and I think it's actually it goes back to the point where ask the SEs and solution architects what they think the really cool features is. Don't listen to the marketing stuff. I know you mentioned that in a previous episode. So right. Just from my perspective, what I think one of the really cool features that we have and are implementing and bolstering in 7.5 is something what we're calling our data diary. So we've always done a great job at focusing on what users are doing, the visibility on users, trying to streamline that investigation process around insider threat incidents. But our customers are telling us you need to double down and also focus on what data is doing as well. So we introduced, again, the data diary that allows you to track the life cycles of files being downloaded from web repositories. And with the explosion of unstructured data, again, growing ever more so day by day in these types of repositories, like think SharePoints, think maybe CRM tools like Salesforce, it's tough to track what people are doing with this type of data. Our tool can actually tag this as it comes down from these web repositories and let you know and provide an audit trail around, was this data moved to an unauthorized location? Was this data renamed? Did someone copy data out of this type of file? And it actually tracks this, and maybe I can show you guys a demonstration if you're expecting to go to, and I know you said you weren't going to RSA, but maybe at Black Hat, but it actually shows the entire life cycle of what data is doing and then ties that back to what the user did with it. So it's a really cool, interesting feature, and it's really tough for clients to get visibility on that today, and we're trying to be able to cut through the time wasting that they spent trying to piece together log files or go to multiple different tools. And in just one singular tool, our tool that can provide this level of audit trail and visibility is something that we're really proud of in this release.
Or, I mean, without that, you don't know until it's too late. And, when you mentioned Salesforce, I think of the times when I've worked for security vendors, right? And one of those pieces of information that has to go to certain people, but there's like limits as to where it can be shared, and you may have limits in your organization. And a lot of times that's your pricing sheet if you're a security vendor. And when it comes out of Salesforce, what happens to it? Who's accessed it and where's it gone, from there? Also, who your customers are and their invoices and what they've paid. Maybe that's not your price list, but knowing what a particular customer paid, that's sensitive information for any vendor, not just in security. And knowing like when that comes out of Salesforce and what happens to it and being able to control it, I think is super important.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And amongst other things is like lead lists or account names and customer information that you're collecting. Maybe you have roadmap material that you're sharing internally. If that stuff gets leaked out, obviously it could be harmful to the company. And,
well, yeah, you're not going to find out until I get an email and someone's selling me your lead list or trying to sell me your lead list, right? I see that all the time. People send me email at least weekly. It's like, hey, you want to buy a list of leads of, potential blah, blah, blah customers or this industry? And I think a lot of that is very shady and has come from data leaks that, people don't want to talk about or just maybe never knew because they didn't have ObserveIT, right?
And yeah, that's a fair point. And back to your point, I know you guys always harp and always talk about, what's the problem you're trying to solve, or what challenges do you help address? Yeah, that's absolutely one challenge that we help address, is like employing a few detection mechanisms, and putting those detection mechanisms in place can help you avoid those embarrassing types of incidents.
Awesome. Well, and now Kevin, you'll be out at RSA?
We will. And my marketing team did give me the booth number. It's actually 4809 in the North Hall. We're very excited to be at RSA and take part of it. We actually have a Game of Thrones theme taking place. That's how you'll be able to find us. Yeah.
Just follow the trail of blood to observe it.
Exactly. Blood and fire, right? And then also too, I think we have a pub crawl on Wednesday night, I hear, if I have it correctly in my notes. So feel free to come by and get an ObserveIT Game of Thrones style stein that we'll be giving out if you come by the pub crawl, and also free beer. So that helps too.
That's awesome. And what was the booth number again?
4809 in the North Hall.
Awesome. Make sure you stop by.
Visit North Hall G246.
Is that because there's Is there 5,000 vendors attending RSA? Is that why it's 4809? No.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, make sure you visit ObserveIT at RSA and check them out. Kevin, thank you very much for doing the interview today. It was awesome having you on the show.
Likewise. Thank you for having me, guys. Hopefully we can chat soon.
Absolutely. And with that, we're going to take a short break, come back, hopefully, with our next guest, or news. I'm not sure which, but stay tuned.
Either way, it's going to be awesome.
Yes.